production is, it's called a verbatim play, and that means it's taken from interviews. I worked for 3 years to interview recent immigrant farmers and then wind it together into their interviews into a play, a dramatic production. And there were 4 couples that I interviewed, some Hmong farmers, Mexicans, Sudanese, and Dutch. And they all came to the United States for different reasons, but all within, mostly from 1980 to 2010. And we're really lucky to have Joseph, who's going to talk to you about a little bit later about all of his pivotal moments in his life. And he was one of the farmers that I interviewed, and he was from Sudan, now what is South Sudan. So this play has had legs. It's toured all throughout the United States from coast to coast. It's been shown at little gatherings of immigrants like you saw in the video that was in Fort Dodge, I believe, and all the way to the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, where we did a show for an agricultural labor conference of the United States, all the way to New York University. The first time we gave this show, it was in Des Moines, and it was at the Unitarian Church. And I asked for comments afterwards. We had a talk back, and the first person to raise their hand and the first talk back ever said, I thought all immigrants were illegal in the United States. And that just blew me away. And, you know, this was a very educated audience. But then I soon realized that most of us in the United States have just a little dim understanding of immigration, the history of immigration in the United States, and how it's working out today. I find it really, really curious that in a country, there's no other country like ours that is made up entirely of immigrants, if you weren't a Native American and here in the first place. And we just cannot wrap our heads around immigration. We have a hard time addressing that issue. So I want to give you a little brief overview of how that's all worked out in our history. As we all know, 1776, we declared our independence from Britain, but it's really important to remember that the founding fathers thought of themselves as British, and they set up this country as if it were going to be British. And the people that came to this country were going to come from England, maybe a few from the Netherlands, but it was basically a Northern European framework. And those are the kinds of immigrants that they thought they were going to welcome forever after that. In 1790, they created what's called the Naturalization Act, and they declared that any free white person of good character who had been living in the US for 2 years could become a citizen. So you see, from the very founding of our country, citizenship had to do with race and racism. So non-whites, non-citizens were denied all the civil liberties that we take for granted. They were denied the right to vote, to own property, to testify in court, anything like that, have a MasterCard, anything like that. And in the 1790 census, there were 3.9 million people in the United States already. That seemed like a large number to me. And the most interesting thing of all is nearly 1 of every 5 people in those 3.9 million people was of African heritage. So things went along with the Naturalization Act until we got to about 1920 to 1960. And what happened during that time in Europe had a significant effect on immigration to the United States. There was the potato famine in Ireland, where basically 1 million people died, 1 million people survived, and 1 million people immigrated. And they mostly immigrated to the United States. There were also wars, lots of wars in Western Europe at that time, particularly in the German area. So many Germans and Irish came during that time. And to me, the most interesting thing about immigration is kind of the domino effect. There's a problem, there's a drought, there's a war, there's a famine, and these people are displaced. So they move to another place, and then they displace other people lots of times. So these great influx of settlers from Europe came in 1820 to 60. And what did they do? They displaced the natives who weren't considered citizens of the United States. And then immigration always in our history has created a political backlash. So in 1849, the Know Nothing Party was established. I love the name. And that was a backlash against the Irish and the German immigrants. And the issue is the same. It's the same for 150 years. And that is that immigrants are going to take our jobs. Immigrants are going to keep our wages low. And in 1850, there was a Chinese wave of immigrants. They worked on the railroads, worked in agriculture and the garment factories, and they were blamed for low wages. From 1880 to 1920, there was another huge wave of immigration from Europe, and these were from Southern, Eastern, Central Europe, predominantly Italians and Jews. They came with the industrialization of the United States and worked in factories to a large degree. But again, racism at the core of this in 1882 is the Chinese Exclusion Act that barred all Chinese from entering the country. We skip up a decade, 1891, another immigration act. And this I love. It excluded polygamists, criminals, and the disabled. And so we move around with our prejudices. It's very interesting. 1892, Ellis Island was opened up, a big processing center with the goal of sending immigrants back for many reasons. So it was really tough to get through Ellis Island. But at its peak in 1907, 1.3 million people entered Ellis Island off of in the harbor of New York. Also, 1907 was the peak of Czech immigration to the United States, which we're here in the Czech Museum. And of course, Cedar Rapids was a site of settlement for the Czechs. We go to now a really hot period of immigration. That was 1917. And that Immigration Act required literacy, and it stopped all immigration from Asian countries. And that was the time in the United States where the Ku Klux Klan was on the rise. It was on the rise not only in the South, but also here in the Midwest. And mostly what they were attacking in the Midwest were immigrants. So 1924 Immigration Act placed quotas on the country of origin, the people that came in. This was really important because it excluded some and favored others. It favored, again, the Northern Western European countries. It excluded, again, Asia. We now had a border issue. This is 1824, so think about it. Think about our border issues today. It goes all the way back to 1924. There was a crackdown at the border, the Canadian border and the Mexican border. And finally, 1924, citizenship was granted to all natives who were born in the US. I love that. Now, 1942, World War II starts. And what happens? Our farmers, our laborers, our healthy young men are overseas fighting that war. There's a big shortage of labor to bring the harvest in the United States. So the border was open for Mexican agricultural workers. Sound familiar? Yes, indeed. And then 1952, in the Eisenhower era, the exclusion of Asians was lifted, but the big year is 1965. And Lyndon Johnson opened up immigration naturalization, lifted the quotas, and you know that was going on then in terms of civil rights. We had the Vietnam War. In that era, we had immigrants coming here from Vietnam, from Laos, and in the play you saw, if you see the play, you'll see that the Hmong came during that time. They had been guerrilla fighters for the United States, and they were able to get to the United States as refugees. Then the Mexicans in the play were agricultural workers in Mexico, but we created NAFTA. And so the profit they could make off of a farm was so small that Bene, one of the Mexican farmers in the play, had 10,000 banana trees, a farm that big in Mexico. And he made more money washing dishes in Arizona or California over the border, when he got over the border, than he could on his farm with 10,000 banana trees. Joseph, who'll tell you his story in a minute, was a refugee from Sudan. He ended up in a refugee camp in Ethiopia, and then he was brought to the United States by the UN to Des Moines in February of all times. It was very, very cold. And then the Dutch farmers that were in the play were invited to the United States. They were recruited to the United States for the dairy industry. And all they needed was $500,000 to plunk down into investment in their dairy, and they set them up with a farm. But not everything works out totally the way you think it's going to be. So they hit low milk prices the year that most of them immigrated. There were about 15 Dutch families that came to Iowa, and they hit high grain prices. They were feeding them grain. They weren't on pasture. And quite a few of them went broke and went back to the Netherlands. In 1986, another key year, this was amnesty was granted to immigrants living illegally in the United States for various reasons. So amnesty was a huge event. And then 2012, Barack Obama set up the DACA program for the Dreamers, people who had been brought to the United States illegally as children and were, here working, integrated into the culture, always fearful that they would be deported. So that's our tour through the history of immigration. And we're still every single day struggling with these exact same issues. How are we going to treat different people from different countries? How are we going to integrate these people into our economy or not? How are we going to integrate them into our agricultural system? What great diverse riches can they bring to us? But how at the same time, we still have the basic core fear that they are going to steal our jobs, or perhaps just create some uncomfortableness for the basic white stock that was here from 1776, who might not enjoy that kind of a challenge. Just driving here, I'm in my office driving down here tonight. I had the radio on, and they're talking about the fact that there's a labor shortage in agriculture. And once again, they're going to try to bring more Mexicans over the border to work in agriculture and get them better visas. As you know, there are different levels of visas. And there's an agricultural visa, but you still can't be here very long on that visa, and it has a lot of quirks to it. So we're still in the same issues. We're dealing with them, and the United States is changing. And I'm very hopeful that we can address this immigration issue and improve it. I mean, tonight, on that report on the radio, it said that Tom Vilsack and Charles Grassley were working together on this issue. So people are working across the aisle. That's a very good sign. And we're, in an economic situation where we need to open up now, post-pandemic, with our own labor shortage. So I hope you go to the show, Vang, and see how these issues play out, and see these amazingly brave and courageous people. Nobody, there are a few adventurers that want to leave their home and strike out for another country. But most immigrants that I know had a very hard time leaving their homes, leaving their families, things that happened to their families after they left, and then to strike out into a country usually and not speaking the same language, educational system is different, all of those incredible adjustments you have to make in different cultures. And you'll see in Vang 8 wonderful people who finally made those adjustments to coming to the United States. And they also made the adjustment of trying to farm again. These are people that have enormous talents, enormous experience in farming, and they usually hit our food system at the very bottom, working at the meat packing plants, and then trying to find access to land, become knowledgeable of our growing seasons, of our varieties, of the different crops that are successful in the different locations in the United States with the vastly different weather patterns. So a big treat tonight to have Joseph Malual here, who will fill you in on his background. He is an extraordinary person. He studied to be an engineer in Sudan, and then had the most bone-chilling experience ever in a refugee camp, shifted to his focus to being a social worker. I met him at Iowa State University when he was getting his PhD in sustainable agriculture. And he's going to talk about his pivotal moments in his career as an immigrant farmer. Joseph, we can't see him, but yeah. I would just really, there's totally a shame. As I said, he's a very handsome man. I'd like to see him, but we're in some kind of computer glitch. So, but he is going to charm you with his voice. So here's Joseph.
Great, thank you very much. And I really apologize for that because this has never happened. And I don't know why it's happening tonight. So, but I hope that the picture the photo you saw there is just me still. Yeah, I'm still the same. So I'm a tall South Sudanese Nilotic. From Nilotic means, the tribe that live on the Nile. And So if you see me walking, you probably will see, yeah, this is Joseph. Yep, I think Mary, you address a lot of things that, as you were talking, and I was just going through my own life as you were addressing those, different issues with immigration and how the entire evolution of how to settle in a different culture and not knowing the language and the culture and know even somebody that you actually know as very well, like an extended family. So I'm going to share, just to summarize my life, I have 15 minutes. And when I was preparing for this, I asked Mary, what do you want to talk about? Because the more I talk about my life, the more I start to know that it's a little complicated. So I'm going to focus on a few things and then you can ask questions. I'm going to take 15 minutes. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the type of life that I was living before I became a refugee. I hope you see my screen. And so this is Sudan is here. If you see my cursor, this is Sudan. It was one country when I came to the United States, but we have fought in this country since 1955. That is 1 year before our independence from British. We fought. That war was settled in 72. We fought again in 1983 until 2005. And we split the country to two, but the war is still going on. It never solved the problem. This is what my life was like when I was growing up. My family raised animals, especially cows, because they have cultural implications and many things that you could think about. So cow is a big part of any Nilotic population. So you can think about Maasai and other group. Those are our group. And then we also grow mostly sorghum. And then Sudan is a multi-ethnic country with over 250, maybe 250 something different ethnics with different culture, different languages. Now we split the country in South Sudan. We have 64 different ethnic groups speaking different languages and eating different kind of food. So I'm from Nuer. This is my ethnic, my tribe, N-U-E-R. And so we actually grow sorghum, a lot of sorghum. That's our staple food. And then, some corn and then other things, plus our cows, and then some fishing. So that was my life when I was growing up. Simple life. I didn't know there was anything better than that. And I've never seen any war or conflict until 1983. And so that totally changed my life. So you see South Sudan, now you can see now the country is split. There was an oil in South Sudan that was discovered by the United States by Chevron around 1978. And that oil became the source of conflict until today. We split the country. Most of the oil is in the south. Before we split the country, the oil was going to the north. And they used to develop their own infrastructure, educate themselves, whatever you could think about economically. But the south was neglected, nothing there. So that oil became a problem. Now we split the country. We start fighting again as tribe over the same thing, because our income for the government is 98% oil, and that is a recipe for disaster. You can think about oil in Africa and other countries. Now, so the war, and that completely changed the life of the entire population of South Sudan, and Sudan in particular. So we have this huge displacement of people. And that is how, Mary, when you were talking about people just split, that is how I split from my family in 1983. So you have this bombardment, gun falling everywhere. They are in the air. They're going to fall, but you don't know where, on your head or somebody there. And so you survive, and when you survive, when you raise, you find that there's none of your family there, but you have, a group of people. And I was 13 at that time. Some kids were even younger than me. So they were taken over by whatever the group and taken care of. Some people made it to the this is an internal displacement. In fact, we have more people displaced internally than refugees in the world today, in their own country. So refugees is a different category. You have to find a way to cross an international border to be a refugee by definition.
Right.
But a lot of people cannot make it to those border. Therefore, they don't get any international, like what I got when I became a refugee and came to the United States. So anyway, through that displacement, I was internally displaced within my country, lost, no phone. Your family could be not really, you could be in Ankeny, Iowa, and your family would be maybe somewhere like in Marshalltown, but you will never know they are there for years. Unless somebody came from there and say, by the way, I saw such and such there, and then you start to go there. So growing up in South Sudan, dependent on land and water and the relationship and our livestock, kind of gave me that idea until today that our life is revolved around the land and the water that we have and the human being. As human being, the power of human being, the creative power, the physical power that we have, that is what we could use to better our life. And so during the displacement, I was displaced many years, and I went to North Sudan. The war went on during that time. Most of my family were gone. Some of them I didn't know how they die until today. Some of them I heard, how they die, and my brothers how they were killed and all that. But I haven't seen any of their remains, because where can I see it? So when I was in Sudan, I was hoping that maybe some of them were alive and one day I will see them. It took me a long time to say that, no, I don't think it's going to happen again. Anyway, in the process of this displacement in 1980, in 1990, 1992, I educated myself I started working when I was 11 years old in construction. Then I put myself through school. In that I go to school in the evening, and then I work, and I go to school in formal education. And I went slowly until I finished my high school there in Khartoum. Then things became very difficult because of the Islam, the different clashes between Christian and Muslim in the north, and everything was bad. We were targeted, and I became a little bit, probably I would call it activist, because I was not happy. I'm a Christian, but I was forced to go to the Islamic training as a part of my going to the university to study engineering. And then I finally, left the country, and there's history behind that. Walked to Ethiopia for 3 months and a half. Not because it was very long, it probably would take me 2 months to walk there, but because of the, there's war somewhere, you stay there for 3 or 4 weeks, and the war kind of, died on a little bit, then you move a little bit. Then I arrived to Ethiopia and became a refugee. That was 1994 when I arrived in Ethiopia. So joined the refugees camp, life in the refugees camp with another population of South Sudanese that were there since 1983. This is where my thinking totally changed as a young person, and looking at the population that's in refugees camp. I just started to look at things from a very different perspective. The powerless, the human suffering, which is stuck with me today, that I wish that none of the human suffering is caused by another human. And so in the refugee camp, I worked with an organization, a Swedish organization called Rädda Barnen. and they were serving the Lost Boy of Sudan. If you heard about the Lost Boy of Sudan, they were young kids that were taken away from their parents, including my own cousin, when they were six all the way to 10, and recruited by the army, by our own rebel forces in camps. And so that when they turn 13 or you are tall and you are 12, then you can go to war. And you gun, you go to war. So when the Ethiopian system changed, the Ethiopian kick out our rebel group, and then those kids remain in Ethiopia. So I became their social worker. No parent, never, since when they were bred by soldiers trying to brainwash them. And the idea of brainwash came from Cuba. That's where they got the idea in Russia. So during that time, the United Nations came with some resettlement program. I didn't even know what it was. I never thought about coming to the United States. I didn't know, as a rural kid, I didn't know anything about going anywhere. So the UN came and say, we have some 100 forms from the United States, and whoever is interested can apply for that. We stay there for a while and say, I don't know how it's going to work out. Anyway, we just fill it out, you threw it in there, and we continue working with our communities, establishing schools, getting that morale, getting that kind of sense of normalcy and kind of, comfort to comfort ourselves. After a year and a half, the form came back and say, I can actually do an interview. So that was scheduled, we had 150 form, only 25 of us qualified for interview. And I think about 13 made it, were accepted. So I was accepted to come to the United States. A month before I could come, I was kidnapped with other 24 South Sudanese people by militants, Ethiopian, at gunpoint, and we were detained hostage for 9 months there. At that time, when I was growing up and seeing all the disaster and people killed and things like that in front of me, I always pray that I don't want to hurt any human being at all. But when I was in that detention, I started to think about that. Well, when I go out, I don't think I want to die just like this. I'm going to grab a gun and get involved because that's nothing I can do anymore. But God worked. My program, the settlement program, was working. So when I was released with my 27 colleagues, the United Nations said you have to leave right now. So I had one month for my medical check to expire. So that would require that I would have to stay again 1 more year to do the medical check. But the UN said you have to go right now. Went to Addis Ababa and went to the migration office, and they gave me this paper. You're going to Des Moines, Iowa. Okay, I didn't know what Des Moines, what it was, and I asked the Ethiopian, where is this place? They said they don't know, and it was January 28th. So I went to the United Nations office and I met an American staff, Shannon Smith. In fact, I emailed her when I arrived in Des Moines. And I told her I'm going to Des Moines, Des Moines, Iowa. And she was laughing. She said, it's called Des Moines, Iowa. It's in the Midwest. I stayed, and he said, by the way, it's cold. Do you have a jacket? I said, I don't have any jacket. Well, you gotta go and you get a jacket, right? It's very cold, really, really cold, the snow and all that. And I ran and I got a jacket. And then the next day I was taken to the airport, my first time to fly. So sitting in the airport, and then later on they say, okay, time to go in. And I got in the airplane, walking into the airplane, and I found myself inside this giant thing with many chairs. I didn't know what it was. And people would start coming in and sitting. I said, this must be the airplane or something. And then what it was. So I got a bag, a little bag. I'm going to show you this one here. You see this migration bag? This is the bag that you have. You have one change of clothes. That bag has your x-ray, your medical check. You don't touch all the things that they seal, you don't touch them. but you have to carry it like that. So they have people line up in all the airports. So when you land, you carry this bag, somebody will come and get you, and they will take you to the next connection. You don't know, you lost, you don't even know if they are going to, you're going to get somebody to actually recognize you. Anyway, I passed Germany and landed the first time in Chicago. And the person was waiting, we had some delay, and she said she was going home. So Joseph, you're going to go to this, and you're going to go to this tunnel, you're going to go to Des Moines. I didn't know what it was, but she said she was going. Anyway, I navigate, and I was looking for a paper, like a paper, you know, thing that would say, you know, you're going to Des Moines, but it was all electronic. So I sat there, I was tired, sat there, and then I sat to read, and then I saw my flight, and then, okay, going to Des Moines, Iowa. I landed in Des Moines, Iowa, too cold, very, very cold. My little jacket was like nothing. Then I was received by staff from Lutheran Social Services as Wang Ming Lee received me, and you know, found me a place, told me that you have to settle within 3 months. Joseph, you have to find a job within 3 months. I told him, no problem. If you can get me you can just help me find that job. That's what I'm looking for. So before 3 months, I got a job at the meat packing. Iowa packing is Des Moines. That's where I started working. It was the toughest job. I've done a lot of work in my life, but I've not seen a job like that. You know, it was, and I lost all my, you know, fingernails and everything. But I had to do that to settle myself. And so I did that, settle myself, get myself a car, and then thought about going to school, because that was my dream. What I saw in the camp kind of gave me an idea that the only way that I can change this thing is I need to get more education and more connection to do it. So I went to Iowa State, and I navigated Iowa State, and I was working full time. At the same time, I work with people with disabilities overnight, and I go to school in the morning. At one point, I worked 38 hours. I worked from Friday to Sunday night, and then leave from there and go and stay the week in Des Moines. That period of time. So I study economics. Now I want to increase. I want food. I thought economic was about food. I found out it wasn't. I look at the agricultural, degree in agricultural economics. It wasn't what I was looking for. Then now I started talking with my advisors, and they say, based on what you are talking about, you need to do sustainable ag with combination with sociology. This is what I did to study sustainable agriculture at Iowa State, and learn about the system of agriculture. And then that is when I started to think about, okay, this is not what I was thinking about. I thought it was, you know, that type of agriculture that people are very happy in rural communities and producing food that they eat in a way that doesn't harm the environment. Finished my degree. It's the best thing I've ever done, and found a job with the University of Wisconsin, Madison Extension. Worked there for 5 years, and this is where I get into food system with Hmong communities, with small farmers in Wisconsin. Did that for 5 years, and last year I changed, and I'm now with the University of Illinois, and I'm currently have 2 projects. One is with young and beginning farmers who are working, doing sustainable food system. I have a grant for that. The next one is I do have a grant that is funded through the SNAP, the nutrition, USDA nutrition. And my idea is to connect this food access to local food production. Because when we talk about food access, we talk about feeding people with food that we don't know where it comes from. How about if we actually use our food and feed, you know, our people with the food that we produce to begin with? I do have still that injustices that have affected my life. I've seen it in rural area, and I start working with people who are went through intergenerational poverty and are having a lot of jail records. and I was working with the counties to integrate them in the community in a way that recognize them as human. I did that in Wisconsin. It's another big project, but I don't have time to talk about it right now. Internationally, because South Sudan, again, is at war, I'm a target there too because of my ethnicity, my tribe. So I'm doing food security and rural development stuff. I volunteer in Liberia and Rwanda. So those projects are going on right now. I think with the time that we have, I'm just going to stop there. I'm sorry, it's very difficult to piece this together. Mary, if that's a question, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job. As we both know, you've had a complicated, a very complicated, complex life with so many twists and turns to it. I mean, Joseph's lucky to be with us tonight in so many ways. Yeah. So, Joseph, thank you so much. I think that gives people a nice overview of what you've been through and what other refugees to the United States go through. And we've got some time now for questions or comments. And so if you want to put them right there in the chat, that's might be the easiest way to go about it. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Yeah. So my question, I'll ask a question, Joseph. Tell me a little bit more about the work when you worked with the Hmong. I knew that. I was like, oh, this is great. Vang brought the Hmong and the Sudanese together with Joseph helping them turn around, helping the Hmong. And it reminded me of that Comida project that was in Marshalltown, which was, I remember that it was a project to get immigrant farmers to help them.
Right.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So now in Illinois, you're working with food access, beginning farmers, and there's a question in the chat, like, how do you plan to progress in that project? I think that is probably directed to that project.
Yep. So yeah, in this the projects that I'm working on, we are now, I just got the grant and we're going to be putting things together. The idea that for the young and beginning farmers, I'm looking at, what are that come from the urban to the rural areas. They want to farm, but they don't have background, they don't have all this, then they try, they kind of they just go back. So then I want to understand, what are their main challenges, and I use community capital framework to look at this. Challenges that are social, that are financial, that are political, that are economics, all the challenges that they are facing, and then I can use that information to have dialogue with community leaders, because that is a local local economic development. But the way the economic development is perceived in rural areas is bringing companies, bringing factories, bringing things from outside so people can get job. So I want to use that data to engage community leaders and say, well, this is okay, but how about looking at your internal resources?
Right.
And build from there. And we know that jobs from outside don't pay that much. In Wisconsin, even though we had full employment 4 years ago, the poverty did not move an inch in Wisconsin.
No.
So what that tells you? And so my hope is that, and it has to be collaborative. So I want to get these farmers into this networking together, and then use that information plus other secondary data to actually engage their leaders and say, this is a local community economic development issue.
Right.
And and the young people too, they're looking for that kind of lifestyle. They want to grow food. They want to protect environment. They have a lot of value that are really into sustainable. Even equity is a big deal
Right.
in this group.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of how we think of economic development is we're going to bring this factory to this town and we're going to build cars here, wherever it might be. And, you know, for me, working in these immigrant communities, you know, I quickly saw these people had as I said, so much knowledge, so much experience, so many different and interesting ideas that they brought here to the States that could be used, but we overlooked that, you know, of course.
Yep.
So I'm delighted to hear that you're finding ways to develop beginning farmers' talents, and land access is,
Yep.
you know, one of the biggest issues. What are you doing in Illinois with land access? How are you working with that?
I'm just reading something here.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. To help youth transition to more sustainable future. So I'm going to answer this question. The sustainable, the agriculture, okay, and this is Wendell Berry says, eating is an agricultural act.
Right.
So when I talk with community about sustainable agriculture, because there's a political implication when you talk about sustainable ag. So what I do is, you know, I have this, which I could have shared, but I have this food system, the loop of food system from the production on the farm, what's happening, in the transportation and process, what is happening, in the marketing, what's happening, in the consumption, what is happening, even the recycle, the nutrient recycle, what is happening. So the transitioning into sustainable agriculture has to be supported by the community and by the community political system. It cannot, the farmers themselves, regardless of how they are passionate about protecting the land, about how to feed us in the right way, in a humane way, they cannot do it because they need support. It took a long time for the country to come to this level of, you know, of industrial agricultural system. It would take an effort, a long time, and intentionality to reverse that with policy and more resources and commitment. And it has to be demand too. So when we talk about the United States is very unique in that no country, I have never voted in my entire life. I voted when I became a citizen in this country. And so this should be part of the dialogue when we talk about, political leaders coming from local all the way to the federal. If they want to run for something, I think sustainable act should be one of the agenda, feeding the people.
Yeah,
and
no, I mean, I think it's going to have to be, because look what's happening with climate change, and just, you know, people are beginning to wise up to the fact that in sustainable agriculture, you can sequester carbon. Like, that's one little idea that has actually caught on. And I mean, our country's burning up right now, and we're just going to be forced into it. Unfortunately, it should have happened a long time ago. That's
right. And I like to mention also the global perspective too about this, that, you know, the climate change. So we, in 2040, this is what they are projecting. The UN is projecting 9 billion people plus, 9 billion plus. And then they are saying that we're going to increase the amount of food by 60%, 50 to 60% from this level of production. And then you think about the land. How much land do we have? Some country in Asia don't have any capacity for expansion anymore. So there are going to be some places that are going to be really squeezed very bad. Especially Africa is going to be one of those. And then this is going to be complicated by the climate change. So we really want to look into not only the production, but also the distribution of that food, and also limit the waste, the waste of food itself. So United States could be okay, you know, United States, I mean, if we think about the next generation coming, it's not going to be sustainable for sure.
right.
But unfortunately, our generation is pushing that risk. to the next generation to come.
Well, and there's going to be just a huge amount of displacement with climate change. We're talking about displacement and immigration. There's going to be mass migrations of people moving around. I mean, there already are. I mean, just this week, I had emails from several people in California saying it's so bad here. I've got, I'm driving out of here. And that's, people are just going to voluntarily start moving. So, yeah, we're going to wrap up here. Just got 1 minute. You want to have a final?
Yeah, Sarah, that's a very important question. We don't think that people go around, they don't think that they are part of the food system. They don't think that they are part of the food system. But if we talk about food system, we are all part of it. And if you are part of it, you can do some change. Okay. Ken Meter has done a lot of studies. And that's this idea that if any of the household use in the United States can actually spend $5 a week on local food, we could pay a significant amount of the farmer's bill. But let's say we are spending $20 a week on local food. That is what my family is trying to do a week intentionally, and socializing our communities into that. I think that will make a difference.
That's great. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, everybody that came tonight. And on my side of things, this play was so successful that it helped launch a nonprofit called AgArts that I'm now executive director of, and you can get on our website at agarts.org, and you can see the other plays that I've written and produced at maryswander.com, and they all have a agricultural focus, and you can see the artists that I've sent off on residencies to live on farms and get a better understanding of their issues. Those are all documented on the AgArts website. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to the Czech Museum and Josh for inviting us. Yeah.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Joseph and Mary, thank you so much. That was amazing. I did want to remind everyone before we leave here, just one more thing. The performance at the museum is going to take place on October 24th, and that's at 6 p.m. So if you're interested in seeing Vang, this amazing play, that's when it'll take place. And the best way to register for that will be at ncsml.org. So definitely check that out. So.
Thank you. And Mary, could you send me that figure? That's a nice one. Dennis took a lot of pictures that I didn't see, the one that you just showed.
Oh, yeah. I'll send you a bunch of pictures. Yeah. I'll send you everything I have. Yeah. No, the photos for the play were taken by Denny Chamberlain, who's won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. And they're just absolutely beautiful. The pictures of Joseph are stunning. They're just gorgeous. So we've done this show for people who speak other languages than English, and they follow along just fine because we have these great photos for the show. So come and see the photos, come and hear the actors. Dang.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night.
Yep. Bye now.